Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to explore the UK government's latest announcement to invest vast sums of public cash in the nuclear industry. The latest spending review included £14.2 billion to kickstart the Sizewell C plant, a £2.5 billion investment to underpin ongoing research into fusion technology, but crucially, it also outlined plans to pump £2.5 billion into small modular reactor development, something that I think is perhaps one of the most ambitious and perhaps the most transformational announcements in the UK's energy history. And it's an announcement I want to focus on today, but it's also clear that after decades of hesitation, the UK government, through its public energy business Great British Nuclear, part of GB Energy, has committed to a bold new era of nuclear power, and it is backing it with public cash. So what does that actually mean in practice? Well, to unpack all of this and help us make sense of the opportunities and the challenges ahead, I'm joined once again on the podcast by Tim Stone, Non-Executive Director of Great British Nuclear and former Chair of the Nuclear Industry Association, the body at the heart of this once-in-a-generation transformation. And, well, Tim is my go-to mind for all things nuclear. So, Tim, welcome back to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Lovely to be back and lots to talk about.
Well, exactly. Lots to discuss today. In particular, I want to focus on and tease out your thoughts about the SMR deal, as I think that's a really interesting and potentially the transformational announcement. But let's start with the big picture. We're hearing a great deal of new nuclear ambition from the government right now. But of course, while the headlines are big, the reality of building Britain's nuclear future will demand urgency, collaboration, investment and delivery to turn this ambition into clean, affordable, homegrown power. We perhaps heard it all before. I don't know. Let's start with this golden age of nuclear that the government talks about. Is that how you see it?
It is now. I mean, the logic has been irrefutable for a very long time. As you know, I first got involved in all this back in the end of 2006, early 2007, and was there for the 2008 white paper helping write that. And we now have exactly what we wanted there, what we needed then, which is two separate fleets of different technologies, and they're going to get built. It's a shame we lost a decade and a bit on the way past, but the case for nuclear critically as part of a balanced, sensible energy system that's designed really in terms of the cost of the national economy. Actually, the system as a whole is what people have to think about now. And wherever you end up, anything that's reasonably balanced is going to have probably 25% nuclear in it, maybe 22, maybe 30, but that sort of order. There's no silver bullets in any of this, but nuclear is a critical part of it. And you can see it. You know, it's a really dull, boring, just works. And it not only just works, but once you've built the stuff, it just keeps going. Now, the design life of these things is 60 years. They'll run for 100 in many cases. So you can't think about the sort of 10, 15, 25-year investments that we have in other bits of the sector, the energy sector. This stuff just gives you a rock-solid base till the cows come home.
Yeah. Well, critically, the government is also hailing Great British Energy, Great British Nuclear, and perhaps you can explain how those two organisations fit together. But they are the vital publicly owned energy company that is going to drive this new era of nuclear. You're a non-exec director of GB Nuclear. So what's the difference between those two organisations, and how will they accelerate this golden age?
I'm going to start with the similarities, which is they both have the same challenge, which is to make it happen. Great British Energy is there with a really competent expert chief exec in Jürgen Meyer, who ran Siemens, to make the renewables investments work even faster and even more disciplined way going forward, just really to drive the build of that. Great British Nuclear, exactly the same. We've got Simon Bone, who used to run Babcock. Simon's a fantastic chair stroke chief exec, and Simon's job is to make sure that we have these things built, that we create mechanisms. I suppose we incubate them within the public sector, but once they're up and going, they're out in the private sector and they're building for us, for the state. And the state's job then is to make sure the stuff is built as fast as we can, and GBN and GBE shrink back down to just being the governance body. That's the plot. So
what's happening at Sizewell is up and running, so it's perhaps more of a GBE issue rather than a GBN issue.
Sizewell and Hinkley are organised, they're their own organisations, they're going, they don't need any more help. It's the new stuff that needs help. It's the newer forms of renewables and newer forms of nuclear that needs the help.
And one of those, of course, is the SMR program. As I said, it's £2.5 billion has been invested in small modular reactors. And I said I think that they are perhaps the game changer. But let's start simple, Tim. What exactly is a small modular reactor, and how does it differ from traditional large-scale nuclear, like Sizewell C and Hinkley Point?
Well, the first thing is exactly as you said, it's the size. So they're not actually small. They're not kind of pocket things. This is not the equivalent of sticking on the back of the car in Back to the Future. So the Rolls-Royce example is 450 megawatts. GE's 300 megawatts. These are smaller ends of the old Magnox stations in terms of size. These are quite hefty devices, but they're much smaller than the big ones and are in principle capable of being manufactured much quicker, much more reliably, and installed. And I'm not going to use the word um, built or constructed because you don't want to construct anything. They need to be installed quickly. If we're going to put 25% of, let's just say, we're going to put 25% of the electricity from nuclear as time goes forward. The electricity demand is going to at least double by 2050, could even easily triple because the demand isn't going to be going down anymore. With AI and data, it's going up. And you've got to replace all the fossil stuff that's there. So it's basically how much electricity can you build? So the job for the SMRs now is to get nuclear out at scale in terms of gigawatts a year. And the way you do that is you produce a product. That's also important as a product for the buyers, because the buyers are not the big old utilities with the people. These are the infrastructure funds. They are the data companies, and they effectively want to come along to you, Anthony, and say, right, where's your catalogue? Okay, page 10. I want 5 of those over there, 10 of those over there. Sort it. It's a very different world.
Because they haven't necessarily got £40 billion to invest. They may have a lot less than that and a smaller energy need.
So one by one, the total cost is much less, but it's also then how fast can you crank these things out, and how fast can you install them? So, in terms of manufacturing, first of all, I'm going to change the language. It is not a small modular reactor that matters. It's a small modular power station.
Right.
It's the power station that generates the revenue, not the kettle that boils the water. So let's get over that. And you've seen that already with many of the SMR companies who are moving really strongly towards the idea of a single product. Rolls have done a fantastic job. They have modularized their power station. Those modules go to site on the back of a 40-ton truck and are bolted together a bit like building a McDonald's on a greenfield site.
Right, yeah,
it's just bits that you bring there, bolt them together. Different model altogether, much faster, much more reliable.
And is that what gave them the edge? I mean, they've been selected as a preferred bidder. Others are available, and I know the government's been doing a beauty parade of them. But what's given them the edge then?
All the bidders did a good job. The 3 finalists did a good job. Rolls were a very clear winner. They did a better job. They did it. This was a big public procurement that was run. Actually, to be honest, it's one of the best public procurements I've ever seen, and I've been involved in all sorts of different infrastructure sectors. And Rolls won it. And there's a whole raft of reasons why they run it. There's no one particular reason, and it wouldn't even be appropriate anyway if there was to go through it here. But they did a really good job. It's a really good example, as indeed some of the others, of the creativity that's now come back into the sector, and a recognition that you can't just have a product for a client, which is basically a giant kit of parts that the client has to stick together. So it's got to become as close to a Nissan production line cranking these things off that are then installed, not constructed. That's a different mentality.
Yeah. But I presume also that, Rolls-Royce has got the first contract, but you want there to be a reasonably credible international or domestic competition in this space to try to lift the whole industry up.
So Rolls have got the first contract, and we're not awarding any other contracts at the moment, to be clear. But what we have said, what the Chancellor and the Secretary of State have said, is that GBN will be running a market-led approach. Details really as soon as they can go out, but the idea is that clearly there's no more bucket loads of government money to put into anything for the time being. I mean, the fact that there's 113 odd billion gone in the first place is simply astonishing, but there are real limits here. But what GBN's going to be doing is looking for the other companies to come and say, we've got a bright idea. This is what we'd like to do. This is the scale of what we'd like to do. And it's not just SMRs. It's SMRs, AMRs, gigawatt. Basically, we've got a massive need for new nuclear other bright ideas, please come along and let's see what we can do to make them happen. So GBN is going to run that process, and there'll be details of how this is going to happen in due course is the official line, hopefully not too long.
Because I imagine that the key role, therefore, in the way you describe it, is to set up this process to make sure that you are making it as easy and straightforward as possible for the private sector to come in with money, because that is what's going to fill the gap between now and what's necessary.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And you already saw back in the last year, earlier this, people like Amazon coming along saying, we're going to put $500 million into X Energy. The money is there to make things happen. It's how do we ensure that we can, as GBN, catalyze the process. So we don't have the money to do it, but what can we do to help make a difference? And it might be that, by the time they're wanting to do serious construction work and installation and preparation and planning and so on, there'll be a bit more money around. So, but we need to help them. We need to build confidence, really, that the UK is open for business. And in that, squirreled away in the announcement on Wednesday, was a reference to the National Wealth Fund. And the National Wealth Fund is going to have some money to help the nuclear sector grow as well. So this is not just, are we doing 3 units for Rolls? Those 3 units for Rolls, I really, really hope turn into 15, 20, 30 units for Rolls as they roll these things out. But we need to make sure that if we're going to get 25% of electricity here, we need others in as well.
So what does £2.5 billion of government investment actually cover then? I mean, where does it get you? Is it design? Is it construction or manufacture? Is it about assembling supply chains, regulatory support? I mean, what does it buy?
It gets you all the way through to a final investment decision where you are ready to start building. And I want to really unpick what that means, because let me give you an example of a big project that really went really well, and that's HS1. That high-speed rail line from St Pancras down to Channel Tunnel was built on budget and slightly early. And it was done like that because Rob Holden, who ran it, did everything up front that he should have done. So when they started work, didn't quite go like clockwork because there were all sorts of surprises, as there always are on big infrastructure projects, but they were able to deal with them on the way past. So at the point that the SMR construction, installation, manufacture starts, we want to make sure that it is really ready to go and that the homework has been done. And that £2.5 billion is to get us there, to make sure all the planning nonsenses are sorted out, that the supply chain is ready, that the more detailed work on the design that Rod's going to be doing has been done. It's basically so that at the point that you press the button and say final investment decision, go, it goes like a racing snake. And the first one is quick, relatively, but it then gets faster and faster and faster. And a large part of this as well, of course, is how do you go faster and faster and faster from what the industry calls the first of a kind to the nth of a kind? Because the nth of a kind really does need to be really quick. The Chinese are building big reactors now in 4 years. I would like to see SMRs being installed on site in significantly less than 2 years from the minute they arrive to the minute there are sparks out at the end. Why not? It's a product. How do you install that product really fast?
Well, I suppose the two answers to that why not, in my mind, are firstly getting the technology right, and secondly knowing where to put them. Are those being worked out?
So in terms of technology, the Rolls design and all the other designs in the competition we've run so far are at one level very dull and boring. It's very established technology. It's a bit smaller than the big ones. Actually, it's not as small as the ones in the back of the Russian icebreakers. There are nuclear-powered icebreakers been churning around for ages. When I went to the North Pole one in 2008, but it's how we get an industrial product. So that's the first step.
Yeah. Yes, to be clear on that though, because nuclear reactors are inside nuclear submarines, they're inside ships. These are much bigger than that.
Yeah, so Rolls is a pressurized water reactor. It's a mini version of Sizewell C, very mini. It's slightly bigger than the ones in the Russian icebreakers. They're not radically different in terms of micro or monster. They are middling sized. Like I said, they're not that different to the sort of size of an early Magnox station or an old coal station. They're that sort of order of magnitude. So you haven't got to miniaturize something, and you don't. It's a how do you manufacture the thing robotically, really, really efficiently, really cheaply, with very high consistency, and then how do you install it really quickly? That's the sort of stuff. It's basically what the industry has needed, which the Rolls guys have demonstrated to a degree. is a Johnny Ive from Apple or a James Dyson, that sort of industrial engineer
Yeah.
that takes all this nuclear stuff, which is long since sorted in terms of the way that the regulators approve it, but turn it into a really polished product.
So the technology is fine. So the question then is where?
Right.
Because that's always in the UK. Where do we put these things? A big problem.
It is. And so last year, GBN bought 2 sites, Wilbur and Albury. Those are there. There's a siting process going on. More sites will be announced in due course, because you're absolutely right. We need to have the sites there so people can see exactly what the options are, where they could go. Of course, some of the old EDF sites are potential candidates in all this, but there's a siting assessment underway. And now we've got the competition for the SMR out of the way, we can focus back on that. See you later in the year.
And in your mind, Tim, is there a date that you would like to see the first SMR plant up and running?
What matters for me for the first one is not precisely when, but that it's a really good first one with the route through. I'd rather they took 6, 9, 10 months, 12 months longer to get the first one on the bars, but then have a really good rapid ramp down of time and cost. It's much more important to do the preparation work and to get that first one right. Personally, it doesn't matter whether it's exactly what the time is. It is that starting point. So after that, you then got the Nissan production line.
But we're in 2025 now. Before 2030?
I doubt it. I think the final investment decision is going to be around 2030-ish. But again, I don't want pressure put on anybody. I'd much rather it's done right and done really well, because the export potential for the Rolls guys is profound. They've already got a very strong relationship in the Czech Republic, which you'll see, but they've got some fantastic other opportunities in many, many other countries.
Yeah.
And the best thing we can do to help them is to make sure that first one just looks as close to what you'd expect from Rolls-Royce, pretty damn close to perfection.
Well, we talked. Well, I mentioned that I feel that this is perhaps a more transformative technology than perhaps the large-scale nuclear power stations. So the Sizewell C, the Hinkley Point C type of reactor, is that something which is going to be consigned to the past, or will we still see that kind of large-scale power station being built?
Around the world, you'll definitely see those large-scale power stations being built. Westinghouse are building in Poland. They're going to be building in Ukraine, in Bulgaria, places like that. For the UK, it's going to come back now to that market-led approach. Will there be another gigawatt option in here? Will we build another EPR somewhere else? I don't know. We have to wait and see where it's going to go. But frankly, whatever you can build, you need to build.
Yeah.
And so the objective, if you like, if I was trying to optimize the SMR industry, it's gigawatts a year. How many gigawatts a year can you crank out?
But also, crucially, surely, Tim, the issue is also going to be around the grid capacity and how much we have to invest in the grid to make all this happen. I mean, are SMRs seen as a solution to this by providing more regionally specific solutions rather than a big national energy solution? So you can put a smaller station where it's needed in a local area and not have to really reinforce the entire grid to make it all work nationally.
The nuclear power stations always need 2 grid connections anyway for safety. Smaller ones don't obviously need the whacking great big connections, but they're still pretty big connections. The real issue here for grid actually isn't nuclear at all. It is the system. What is the system going to look like as we rebuild it? Because the system that we have is basically a geriatric remainder from the 1950s and 60s. And somebody, and I'm not sure where this is going to happen because it's certainly not happening yet, but there has to be some sense of, over the next 50 to 100 years, because that's the timescale of the decisions that you're making, like it or not, where's the demand going to be? Roughly, not stick measurement. How much demand is there where? How do you wire all this up? How do you supply the power to that? Do you have the power up there to be supplied down here? Or how do you physically build the whole system? That system architecture, the guiding mind behind it, has got a whopping job to do. And right now, I haven't got a clue where it's all going to go. And I don't think I'm going to have a clue for a couple of years yet either.
No. See, I'm already starting to get worried, Tim, because you're talking about the importance of system thinking, and we know how difficult that always is when it comes to UK or global infrastructure. I mean, what's the role of bodies like GBN and your old organisation, the Nuclear Industry Association, in ensuring that these ambitions are actually treated as systems and are brought into reality?
So GBN is already talking to the rest of the energy industry and to the people like NISO. What we can do is to say, this is what nuclear can provide into a balanced system for the national economy. We can give them senses of how long things take, how long they will take, how much they'll cost, how much the cost will shrink over time. But somebody has to provide that overarching guiding mind. And it is absolutely not a case of saying, well, this is what we've got, let's follow our nose and see where it goes. So a lot of the modelling that's been done historically has been all about the current market and how that works and how the current system works. You can't do that. You've got to work out what the ideal solution should be in terms of the lowest cost to the national economy. You've then got to say, can I get there from here? And the answer would be probably not. So how do I sub-optimize that to make it deliverable for renewables, for nuclear, for transmission, for
Yeah.
storage, for the whole system? And look at what's happened in Spain. They did it exactly the wrong way around. They built loads of stuff and then worried afterwards about how to wire it all up. What you should be doing is working out what the system looks like, where the infrastructure is going to go, and then put things on it, not the other way around. So we need that exactly the word system thinking. I've been banging on about this for years. How do you know what you're going to be aiming for? Because if you end up put stuff in the wrong place, it's just a drain on the national economy. We need to get this right as a state. And the thing that's still hard to let go is that you can't do this by markets and Darwinian evolution. You don't have time. You don't have time to run seven things in parallel and go, all right, that one's a bit cheaper, let's build more of those. You've just got to make the best guess you can and build like Billio.
And that's what GB Energy comes in. It's that guiding mind to make it all happen.
Absolutely.
What role have they got also to make sure that the economics work and help bring the cost of these down? Because that's the critical part, presumably.
Yeah, well, of course, all the bidders put in a lot of work into their designs in thinking through how they could bring the cost down from the first to the nth of the kind. GBN is now the client for Rolls, and we've got to work with GBN with Rolls to help them do the best they can to produce that manufactured rapid installation process that brings the overall cost down. But the other half of this is not just about the capital cost, because you heard me before. The two numbers that matter in nuclear are capital cost and cost of capital. And you've got to make sure that the whole process is done in a way that is A, highly investable, and B, produces the lowest cost of capital you possibly can, because every basis point on that cost of capital is a needless tax on the cost of energy to industry and the consumers.
Yeah. So that £2.5 billion that has been put into the Rolls-Royce development, your hope and your expectation is by the time we get to 2030 for final investment decision, they will have been able to lever in some more money to make this a bigger program.
I'm sure they will, because as I said, they've got an awful lot of opportunities across Europe. Everybody's been, and indeed around the world, lots of countries have been waiting to see what GBN does with our selection. So I would not be surprised now to see a rolling out of opportunities for Rolls and others across Europe. But the critical thing now is that we all need to cooperate. What you mustn't do is to have two different countries both fighting for the same resources, because all that happens is the headhunters will make a fortune and it will be it'll be more expensive than it needs to be. It's about collaboration, not competition.
But from your experience in financing and energy markets, would you say that the UK is now a preferred destination for nuclear investment?
It's certainly a very good one, and it all comes back to the way the government of the day creates trust and confidence in the whole process. And it was interesting when we had the round table in 2022. We've been chopping and changing our minds, for donkey's years, pretty much with our underwear, and the lack of trust and confidence was palpable. In contrast to what was happening in Canada, where they'd set out a roadmap in 2016 and just kind of followed it. We now have a consistent approach. We have a Secretary of State who is demonstrably solidly behind nuclear as part of the balanced system. We have a Chancellor who's on side. We have a Prime Minister who's on side. The opposition, interestingly, the phrases that have been used, I think, behind closed doors are making a strong show of liking it, but not liking it. So the political games are there, but actually they like it too. We even have Lib Dems saying, of course, this is a good thing to be doing. That national trust and confidence is vital to maintain as the politics unfold, to ensure that we remain a destination of choice. and that the financing costs that go with that are as low as we can make
Yeah.
them.
So we've got the political support, we've got potentially the investment support. Two other things on my mind: the skilled capability to deliver, and I suppose the regimes around planning and regulatory setup to make it all happen. So talk about the skills to start with. We've been talking for a long while about the UK losing its nuclear skill workforce. Is that coming back now? Do we have the skills to develop a new fleet of SMRs?
Oh, we've got a fabulous set of skills here. What we have to do now is make sure they stay here, and that again, as other countries develop, that we work with them to make sure that the skill base is grown as fast as we can. The supply chain for people is, I think, the most important supply chain in this whole process. We need to make sure that we give people the confidence that they've got the, frankly, multi-generational careers coming here, and that they don't have to go off to other
Yeah.
countries. Some will, that's fine, but we need to make sure that this remains one of the really good places to work in the nuclear sector. There's a great skill base there already. There's about 85,000 directly employed, and I mean, it's like 250,000 indirectly. We've got a fabulous industry. And we have lost people
Yeah.
over the last few years simply because of the lack of confidence in government policy. Hopefully this now fixes it. But we have to keep a very careful eye on that. And Destination Nuclear has done a really good job of driving some people into the system. Because nuclear it's not about quantum mechanics. This is just about really high quality engineering, doing a really good job.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in it, frankly, that is difficult at all. It's just it's doing it right.
But it's important because 70%, I think, of the supply chain spend is meant to be UK based. I mean, this, I imagine, in practice means what's good news for British manufacturers and good news for regional employment and regional development.
I don't see any reason why the new nuclear world that GBN is driving doesn't produce jobs pretty much all over the country. And it was interesting when they were building Sizewell B back in the 90s. The NIA at the day had a jobs map, and they had a map showing which constituencies had jobs from Sizewell B, and the only one that didn't was right in the top left of Northern Ireland. Every
Right.
other parliamentary constituency had jobs from Sizewell. That'll happen with the SMR because although they are they're smaller, lots and lots and lots of them in terms of gigawatts will just generate lots of jobs. And the supply chain
Yeah.
in the UK is really well placed to grow and to support not just roles, but the others that will then come in through the market-led approach in the exports from here, because this is a great place to prove that we can do this.
Yeah. So you're happy on that front. Last thing, the challenge is, I suppose, planning and policy. What still needs to happen? You mentioned that we've got a couple of sites earmarked, but if an organisation, you mentioned Amazon, big data storage companies want to start getting involved in this, how do they get through the planning framework to make SMRs scale sufficiently and successfully?
This is a key part of what GBN has to do to help. The planning process, and I don't think my political friends will like me saying this, but it's a surfeit of democracy. We have a national challenge to make sure that we have an energy economy that means that we are competitive for our children and grandchildren. And what's happened over the last probably 15 years is the planning process has become unbelievably complicated. And is it in the national interest the way it runs? It's the balance of national interest versus local interest. So it's a horrible political nut, but frankly, it's a problem that the state itself can never escape. And so the question we have to get to is how do we have a planning process that is fair and reasonable, but crisp?
Yeah.
And none of this stuff is rocket science. The consequences, and particularly with the SMR process, where it does become a very handle-turning mechanistic exercise, the process for going through any planning decision to say, this is what we need. You've seen it before, guys. It's like that. It's like the others. We've done them before. How do we turn this into the simplest version of the planning process you can in the national interest? And it's how politically we can underline that big phrase in red ink 3 times. It's about the national interest and how we all have to share in our rights and our responsibilities. So, if you go back over the last 20, 30 years, there's been a bit of a diminution of our responsibilities to the state as opposed to our rights from it. And we have to readjust that balance a little bit. And the deal between the state and the citizen needs to be, I think, talked up a little more and actually being honest about it. We all
Yeah.
share responsibility for this.
Not least him around the issues that are tangibly difficult for local communities around nuclear waste. We haven't necessarily completely solved that particular issue in our government policies. More nuclear power stations presumably equal more waste. I mean, how are we going to be tackling this?
So the waste solution has been clear since 2008. So the Secretary of State can't give permission to build a new nuclear power station unless they're satisfied. Go read page 99 of the document. It's called the page 99 test. That there is or will be a clear solution to nuclear waste. There is. It's called a repository. The amount of material that has to go down the repository is tiny per reactor, but we just need to get on with it. And we did, in my view, precisely the wrong thing. In Finland, what they did was they said, we're going to build a repository. These are all the benefits that will come with that repository. Communities, please bid. And we said, please will you volunteer to take waste? We did it the wrong way around. When the French build a TGV line, they go along to somebody where they've drawn a line on the map and they say, I'm really sorry, your house is right in the red line running through the middle of it. Your house is worth 250,000 euros. Do you mind moving if we give you 350,000? We will go along and say your house is worth £250,000, but it's got planning blight, so it's now only worth 200. So are you okay if we give you 180? And it's all done in the name of
Yeah.
public value for money, as opposed to thinking about the really long-term consequences. So we have to get serious about this.
So stop kicking that can down the road and actually come up with a repository strategy that will work. Because the challenge there, I suppose, is that it's a decision that will have centuries of impacts, and therefore it's very easy to kick it down the road every few years.
And there are bits of Whitehall that are really good at saying, do you know, we need a little bit more information on that. So let's do a bit more work and a bit more work and a bit more work. And it's pretty hard to say to somebody, no, you've got the data you need. Make a decision. Oh, but I don't have all the data I need. Guys, just get on with it. In no walk of life do you sit there putting a mic. You don't choose who you marry by applying a micrometer to the emotions. It's kind of not shtick stuff. You know the right answer for these things. I view a lot of this stuff as a bit like the definition of vice. You can't define it, but you know it when you see it. And we chase spurious accuracy sometimes. So I really hope that we can make rapid progress now on the repository and just get that one over and done with, like the Finns have done.
Okay, well, the surface of democracy is always a challenge for any infrastructure development, and I would take that analogy with getting married on board as well. So, Tim, just to round us out, what's your message there? What's GBN's message to the public and the policymakers about why nuclear, why SMRs are so important, and why are they important now?
Two bits. Nuclear itself is a critical part of a balanced energy system in terms of the lowest cost to the national economy. Always has been, always will be, somewhere around 25%, limiting factor for how fast you can build it. SMRs are part of the solution to how fast can you build the gigawatts a year? How can you turn what has been essentially a very labour-intensive old style construction mechanism into something which is as close as possible to buying an Airbus and installing it, a bit like that delivery flight from Toulouse. That's what GBN has to help make happen. And we have to then show the rest of the world how to do it, so we can use the UK as a fabulous export base for all these companies, not just the technology companies, but the supply chain as well. And indeed the teaching, the training, that's all great export stuff. Yeah. GBN's job is to make it happen, to catalyse it and then get out of the way.
So just to go right back to the top, I mean, in reality, can this government's new nuclear ambition for a golden age of nuclear really be delivered, I suppose, at the timescales and budgets desired, but the timescales and budgets needed by this government to demonstrate success to the public in terms of lower bills?
Nuclear is not going to make any difference to the bills between now and 2030, other than in the continuous operation of the existing nuclear fleet. If Hinkley comes on, that's great, but fundamentally it's not about the bills 2030. This is about your children and grandchildren. It's about the economic future of the country. It's about a long-term series of really high-quality jobs. And again, if you look at the NII data on typical family income around nuclear power stations, I mean, it's way, way, way better than the hinterland. These are really good jobs. That's the issue.
Yeah.
This is not about bills tomorrow. There's lots of work to be done on the way the electricity market works to help fix that, because the electricity market itself is anachronistic. Nuclear is part of our national strategy for our children and grandchildren. That's where it has to be focused.
Okay. Tim, thanks so much for coming back to the podcast to update us on this latest government nuclear ambition and for bringing that vital dose of reality. I think that message that you make at the end there, I suppose, maybe not what politicians want to hear, but it's the reality. But it also seems clear that there's a lot of water to flow under the particular bridge. But I suppose at least now it is flowing. So thanks very much for joining us, and good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you. Lovely to be back.
Well, it's good to see you with a big smile on your face as well. So that's always good. But sadly, that's all we've got time for in the podcast right now. But there is more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. Thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Tim, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.